where we were. What I was saying is that Shakespeare works in most of his plays on a principle of pairings. He likes to put things together. Most of you know at least a bit Romeo and Juliet from doing it before, for example. And you think of the similarities between the opening scene of Romeo and Juliet and the scene in the middle where Tybalt and Mercutio are killed. They've pretty much got the same structure to them. And so he's actually creating that link between them to create extra meaning. And we see that a lot in Macbeth. Pairings that allow us to see and understand across the entirety of the play what he's trying to achieve, but also that will allow you to take moments that may be in your extract or maybe related to things in your extract and show connections through them. Now, I'm going to start my first pairing here. Is between these two scenes. Okay, and they seem an obvious pairing, and I suppose in some ways they are. But it's the meaning rather than the fact that they pair that's important. Okay, so in Act 1, Scene 3, the witches visit Macbeth. In Act 4, Scene 1, Macbeth visits the witches. The key is the difference. By this point in the play, the witches hold the upper hand. Early on, they have to go to Macbeth themselves and try and draw him in. Now he is seeking them out. And that's quite interesting because, of course, he's king by this point. He wasn't by this point. Okay? As he becomes more powerful, in some ways, he could be argued to becoming less powerful. Now look at the connections between them. They both begin with the witches on their own. Act 1, Scene 3, often cut, but it's that bit in which they discuss the sailor's wife who refused to give them chestnuts and therefore they tormented her husband. At the beginning of Act 4, Scene 1, the famous conjuring of the potion through throwing in all those horrible ingredients. But in both cases, even though, as we're saying, the witches are getting the upper hand by this point, it still indicates that the witches are the ones who are in control to some degree. In both of them, Macbeth is told three things. The first of which, in both cases, is not a prediction. Bane of Glamis, first time, beware Macduff, second time round. So again, three, and of course the three going with the witches, that idea, three things each time that then will propel the next stage of the play. It's almost like, by the time we've got to this one, what they've done here has kind of like come to an end. Okay. In both of them, then, an extra prophecy on Banquo's children is made. First time in response to Banquo asking, second time Macbeth asking. The prophecy remains the same. In fact, it gets worse here because, of course, we get a line of kings. There it just says, your children will become kings. Here, it says very clearly, they're going to go on for generations and generations. And in both of them, a messenger brings news which appears to confirm one of the prophecies. In Act 1, Scene 3, of course, Ross turns up and tells him he's going to Cawdor. In Act 4, Scene 1, it's Lennox, I think, who turns up and gives the news that Macduff has fled to Scotland. Beware Macduff. Okay, so he's already being given a warning that goes with that. So what's the point? What's the point of this? What's important about this? Well, from my point of view, as I said, I think they are two very, very key moments in terms of propelling things further forward, but they also show how much control the witches potentially have over Macbeth. And supernatural is definitely a possibility for coming up this summer. Questions about supernatural. These are very, very good evidence that they are completely in control. Now, there also shows us here that we get the impact immediately. That almost creates that confirmation bias that allows Macbeth to say, yes, I what they've told me must be true because I'm hearing something that already is going with it, even though you don't. And of course, this idea about Banquo's children, the prophecy there, very, very important, that he's actually given news really that tells him that what he wants isn't going to happen, yet he keeps going past it. So again, those two pairings, lots of meaning you can get out of them. We also get a pairing here between two key scenes for our two central characters, where I would argue the same thing happens pretty much, but for the two different Macbeths at each time. First of all, post the murder, immediately post the murder, we get Macbeth reacting to the horror of the murder of the king. All that wandering around with the daggers, going, oh God, what have I done? What have I done? You know, I'll never sleep again, all that stuff, where he's lacking control. And Lady Macbeth takes over, takes a practical side to it. But then when we get to Act 5, Scene 1, Lady Macbeth's sleepwalking thing, she is doing the same. She is reacting to the horror of the murder. It is just delay. Now, again, the parallels are there. Macbeth showing evidence of his mind being disturbed. Lady Macbeth showing evidence of her mind being disturbed. Both of them focusing on blood as guilt which can't be removed. His whole Neptune's Ocean, the whole Neptune's Oceans couldn't remove the blood from my hand. Her trying to get out the spot, but also at the same time, her comment about all the perfumes of Arabia couldn't get the smell of the blood away. It's almost exactly the same construction, those two images. Yeah. And the fact that they have a horrific response, and then there's someone else around who gives the more practical response. Lady Macbeth first time, here the doctor and the gentlewoman. Now, I'd say this reveals a lot of meaning here. First of all, let's go to this pairing of images. What's significant about that? Or how is she repeating the same structure? All of Neptune's oceans could not wash the blood from my hand. All of perfumes of Arabia could not sweeten the smell of this little hand. Because if you remember, when he says this in Act 2, Scene 2, Lady Macbeth is not there. This is when Lady Macbeth has gone to take the daggers back herself. So she's not even on the stage. So she doesn't even hear him say that. So how does she manage to repeat it here? The answer that we normally come up with throughout the play is it's the influence of dark supernatural forces, the witches, and their like. And that comes into this idea of the disturbed mind. There's evidence of a disturbed mind. Can just say that in both cases they seem to be going mad. Okay, whatever that means to us. But I would say connect it with the other things that we've got there, and what you're seeing is evidence of supernatural forces, of dark forces invading their mind. Think of the things that Macbeth says. I couldn't say amen. I heard people praying, I couldn't say amen. I heard a voice saying, Macbeth shall sleep no more. Macbeth has murdered sleep. Hearing voices, feeling unable to say something religious, all could be very clear evidence of disturbed mind. But then again, at the same time, my argument is this. What did the witches want from him? They wanted him to murder Duncan. They wanted him to kill the king, to disrupt the natural order of things. Many of you will have studied things and talked about this idea of the Elizabethan and now Jacobean order of things, natural order of people in the line like this, and the king is only second to God. Murdering him completely disrupts that order. The idea that dark forces want chaos. Now he's done it, they turn on him. That's the interpretation that I would take from this. Now he's committed the murder, he's killed the king, he's created chaos. Who cares now? Now we can turn and start taunting him. You're not going to sleep anymore. And remember, that idea of sleep came from the witches in Act 1, Scene 3, when they were saying one of the ways they tormented that sailor to punish his wife was to deny him sleep. Sleep coming back all over the place. So maybe so much evidence of the witches disturbing their mind. And then what about here? Well, you've got Miss Bridget in here who will tell you all about this. We've had conversations about this before. One of the things, if you remember, that Lady Macbeth says right when we first meet her is pretty much what she got. What has she got as an argument, as an armament? What she got as a weapon? Words. Come ye hither, or hide ye hither, that I may pour my spirits in your ear. Okay? She can persuade, she can speak, she can talk. And we see her do it. In this scene, her language falls apart. She's babbling. And as the scene goes further on, her language breaks down to the point that she is just saying unconnected things that seem to make virtually no sense at all. And then ends up repeating, to bed, to bed, to bed, to bed, to bed. She has lost all power of speech. The thing that she had. The witches have removed that from her. So it's, I suppose, again, because she's done her job by this point. So you see how the connection can suggest what he's saying is going on here at this point. How they are getting involved. How the blood as guilt is something that she can't see before, but she can see it now. And the third pairing, two of the murders. In fact, the two murders that we see happen on stage. Okay, outside things that happen in war, like the killing of young Seward and Macduff killing Macbeth, these are the two murders that we see Macbeth actually commit on stage. Well, of course, he's not there. He sent murderers in both cases, but they pair up very well, and they show at these stages where Macbeth is. The connection. They're seen on stage, as Duncan's isn't. There's a child involved in both of them. The impact of them is massive, and I would argue they're a turning point for Macbeth. Differences. The child involved in Act 3, Scene 3, Fleance, escapes. The child involved in Act 4, Scene 2 is murdered. And in fact, that's the only person in this scene that we see murdered on stage. Lady Macbeth runs off. Lady Macduff runs off, and they chase her afterwards. Why? Well, what's more shocking than watching a kid being killed on stage in front of you for no good reason? Okay, it's a horrific moment. Look at, therefore, how brutal he's become as it moves further on. Now, I'd argue these are both turning points to a degree, particularly the murder of Banquo. I think the murder of Banquo is more significant than the murder of Duncan, really, because, you know, many of us can understand the murder of Duncan was done for ambition. The murder of Banquo is just plain covering in track stuff, and it's his best friend. It's the person who shared it, all done purely to keep himself as king. It's horrific, and I think that's one of the reasons we see it on stage. Ask yourself this question if you don't agree with me. What ghost do we see? We don't see the ghost of Duncan. That to me is the climax, and from that point onwards, it's all downhill from Macbeth. In fact, I'd even argue that it's particularly the ghost of Banquo scene, where he has all the important people in the room with him, see this ghost, you know, and start shouting randomly at the air. And from that moment on, nobody's on his side. From that moment on, they're all leaving. In fact, there's a scene straight after it that rarely is paid attention to, with Lennox talking to a lord, where pretty much Lennox gives the official version of events. Yeah, where he says, "Oh yeah, Banquo was killed by Fleance. Yeah, and Duncan was killed by his children, who then fled." And he says it in a way that comes across, look, it's sarcastic. Yeah, of course. Of course, that's what happened. They don't believe him anymore. The official version of events isn't believed. It's that murder of Banquo that turns him and takes him too far. And then, of course, the murder of Macduff family is creating one of the most ridiculous things he does. It's creating motive for Macduff to kill him. Macduff kills him for revenge. And that's what he does. It's a horrifically misjudged moment, isn't it? You know, told to beware Macduff. Ah, he's fled to Scotland. Right, I can't get him. What shall I do to the person I'm told to beware, who's a big danger to me? I'll kill all his family. That won't cause any problems. You know, it's a dreadfully misjudged moment, but it turns things for him and brings it towards the end. So there's three particular moments. There are other ones where you can see two scenes he's deliberately put together that show us the change across the play between those two moments and invite us to compare. There are other pairings. The two battles, the opening and the closing battle, right? The one that we hear of at the beginning, the one that we see at the end. First of all, it's Scotland fighting Norway. Secondly, we've got closing battle at the end where they're fighting and trying to overcome Macbeth. Of course, we have rebels in both of them. We have MacDonald, who's a rebel in the first one, and we have Malcolm, who is rebelling against the current king in the second one. Macbeth succeeds in killing the first. He doesn't succeed at the end. We have traitors in both of them, both of whom are the Thane of Cawdor. The Thane of Cawdor turns on Duncan at the beginning and is punished for it. The Thane of Cawdor, as in Macbeth, turns on essentially his countrymen and doesn't do that right and is punished for it. Clear links between them. So we see in both of those the confrontation between Macbeth and MacDonald here, and a confrontation between Macduff and Macbeth here, which in both cases results in their head being chopped off. I'm sure that's the only reason why the Macbeth head is chopped off at the end. And remember, that would have been, you know, that's a thing that's clearly stated in a play that doesn't have much in the way of stage directions. Macduff has to come on stage with Macbeth's head at the end, having cut it off. And again, why? Well, to remind us of what Macbeth did to a rebel, a traitor earlier in the play. He's gone full circle. He has become the person he was defending Scotland against. Now that works in terms of paired characters as well. He does like to pair and contrast characters together. Macbeth and Banquo is a very obvious example, but a very good example to look at here. Think about it. Macbeth and Banquo at the beginning of the play are together. They experience things together. They appear together. They are clearly friendly. And then the witches appear. And the witches speak to both of them. But they react very differently. Banquo's the one who starts talking to the witches. Banquo's the one who's really, it always still makes me laugh, that beginning bit when Banquo starts randomly insulting them. For no good reason at all. I don't need to, I just enjoy it all the time coming to this bit here where he says, what are these? Which is a great introduction straight away. Yeah. What's that? You know, not who's that. What's that? So witness of on their attire that look not like the inhabitants of the earth, and yet are on it. Yeah, remember they're right in front of him. You know, what are these things that don't look like they belong on the earth, but are? And then start asking them questions aggressively there, and point out, you know, you seem to understand me, but I'm not sure what you do. You should be winning, of course, and yet your beards forbid me to interpret yours. And, yeah, that's a bit harsh, isn't it? Appeared in front of me. You know, yeah, you should be winning, but you got beards, and so I don't think. Why say that? Anyway, that's all Banquo. Whereas Macbeth orders them to speak. Macbeth starts going, speak if you can. So again, a slight difference in their approach to it. Of course, when they speak, Banquo is the one who speaks back to them ahead of Macbeth. Macbeth takes them a lot more seriously. although they both believe in it. Later on in that scene, remember, when they hear about him being Thane of Cawdor, Macbeth's response is immediately to say, the greatest is behind. The greatest is yet to come. If this is true, I'm on my way to becoming king. Banquo's reaction is to say, yeah, possibly, but I'm not sure. I'm not comfortable with this. And he immediately spots equivocation, the thing that's going on. He immediately spots what the witches are doing. So straight away, right. I think there's a very strong possibility they're just telling us some things to get us on board, and then they're going to try us a bit later. So that shows you again the more practical idea that Banquo has here. They both have ambition. Don't think that Banquo doesn't. Banquo persistently through the play comes back to this. Banquo's soliloquy, which we'll mention in a minute, in Act 3, Scene 1, has a very brief bit at the beginning where he says, everyone thinks it's the soliloquy in which he blames, he says, I'm suspicious of Macbeth. Well, he says it briefly at the beginning, but the majority of the soliloquy is, if this is true, maybe my kids are going to become king. He definitely wants this to happen. He's very ambitious. But the difference is he talks about hope all the time. Hopes that they'll come true, as opposed to Macbeth, who gets on and acts and does it and makes it happen. Banquo declares his loyalty. Macbeth doesn't. I was just looking with year 10 at Act 2, Scene 3, when they react to the murder. And there's a really, really interesting moment in it. Banquo, as you may be aware, takes control, takes command straight away in that scene. He says, right, let's get dressed and let's meet together and let's work out who did this and work out what we're going to do next. It's Banquo who does that. But the really interesting thing is what he follows it up with. When he stands, he says, this is a line. If you had your copies, you can use it. Otherwise, you can note it down if you need to get there. It's Act 2, Scene 3, and it is around about line. If we can find it, why have I lost it? Yeah, round about line 127, 128. Okay. Round about 127, 128 in Act 2, Scene 3. This is where he's just said, let's meet and question his most bloody piece of work to know it further. He says, fears are shaken. We're all scared. And then he goes, in the great hand of God, I stand. And thence against the undivulged pretense, I fight the treasonous malice. In other words, he stands up and says, right, in the name of God, I am standing here right now and saying, I am going to find out and fight against whoever did this. Now, I suppose to some of us that might seem, well, obviously. Yeah? But not obviously. Think about the politics of this time. The king is dead. Being loyal to the king, what benefits that? Loyal to a dead man. There's nothing to be gained from that. The person who did it is quite clearly in that room, in that area right now. That's the person you want to be loyal to. That's the person who's most dangerous to you now. No, Banquo says, no, I remain loyal to that king. I remain loyal. I stand against the treason of killing him. That's his declaration right there. And of course, it's a direct contrast, isn't it, to Banquo? We just watched Macbeth actually do it. We watched Macbeth commit treason. He stands as I stand against treasonous malice. Remember, just before the murder, Macbeth tries to get him on side. Just before the dagger soliloquy, he goes to him and says, it's after the bit where he lies to him, Banquo says to him, oh, I've been dreaming of the weird sisters recently. He goes, oh, no, I don't think about them at all, Macbeth. The biggest lie you can think of, considering we've just been watching him for scene upon scene upon scene talk about them. He then says, but I want to talk to you about them at some point. I've got an offer. I've got an offer to make you. And if you come join me, I'll make honour for you. Oh, surely he's testing this. He's testing the water. Can I get Banquo on board here? Can I get him to join me? But the interesting thing is, Banquo seems to know what he's talking about, because his response is, okay, as long as it doesn't go against my loyalty, then I'll listen to you. That's his response. As long as it doesn't go against my loyalty, I'll do whatever you want. But why say that? Why say that straight away? Where would that? You'd have to be suspecting that that's what he's going to say, to come up and say, "You might be testing my loyalty." Is okay. You see what I mean? It's Banquo shows loyalty in the face of Macbeth not showing loyalty, and that's a direct difference between the two of them. Now, I mentioned that soliloquy. Don't forget as well, in Act 3, Scene 1, the structure of it. You get a Macbeth, you get a Banquo soliloquy at the beginning, right? You get a Macbeth soliloquy. And between those, you get Banquo and Macbeth having a conversation. It's deliberately constructed, that scene, to show the contrast. Banquo says, "Yep, I suspect Macbeth, but I'm interested in the what might happen to my children." We see a kind of frosty conversation between them. Macbeth afterwards goes, I'm nervous of Banquo. I'm not sure about him. I don't trust him. I think he knows, and I think he's a danger to me." He's right. He is. He does know. But is he as much of a danger? I'm not so sure. What we're showing, though, is the difference between the two of them when you pair them up together. Okay, so very quickly, pair characters. Give you one more example. Duncan and Malcolm. Father and son. King at the beginning, king at the end. We're invited to compare them. First of all, I'm talking about the Thane of Cawdor moment. What I'm talking about is at the beginning of Act 1, Scene 4, this is when the Thane of Cawdor has been executed, and they're waiting to hear news of it. And Malcolm says, the people who went to watch it for us haven't come back yet, but I've heard a few things about it. If you remember this bit, Malcolm says, describes the way he died. He says, it was strange the way he did it. He was waiting there to be executed. He said he was sorry for what he did. He asked for the king's pardon. He showed regret. And he basically just stood there and took his death like it was just another day. Malcolm is fascinated. He's fascinated about the behaviour of this man. He's a studies man. He studies people. He wants to understand why people behave the way he is. Duncan dismisses it. Duncan says, he's a man in whom I had absolute trust. There's nothing you can gain from looking at someone's face and see what's in their mind. I put an absolute trust in it. He dismisses it. Malcolm's more interested. There's a difference between the two straight away. Malcolm's paying attention. Duncan is obsessed with trust and the betrayal of trust, because that's how he works. And that's the second point there. Duncan constantly talks about trust and then constantly makes the problem of over trusting people. Think about it. In the first few scenes, what have we got? We've got 3 people turning on Duncan. MacDonald is a rebel. He's rebelling against him. The Thane of Cawdor turns traitor on him. Macbeth murders him. In the first few scenes of the play. That's a man who trusts too much. Okay? Malcolm, think later in the play. Think in that interminable Act 4, Scene 2 scene where he's in England with Macduff that goes on forever. And he's talking to Macduff and he starts to test him and test his loyalty. A weird, strange thing that he does when he starts pretending he's worse than Macbeth and then turns around and goes, "No, I was only joking. I was just testing you out." But it's his technique. I'm not sure I can trust you. I'm going to test you. Their approach to Macbeth. Duncan sees him as wonderful, fantastic, trustworthy, excellent. Malcolm remains suspicious of him as he goes further through. And then their political nous at the end, their political way of looking at things. Duncan doesn't seem to have that kind of political way of seeing things. It's clear, I will things like this, that's how it goes. Malcolm, he seems to get it. He seems to understand the way of doing things. In that scene with Macduff a bit later on, where Macduff is told about his children being killed, Malcolm uses it immediately to say, right, you want to go and get revenge, mate. You want to go and get this sorted. In other words, come and help me. I can use this guy. He's wound up now. He sees everything he does. On the way to the battle, it's his idea to hold up the things, to hide their numbers, hold up the trees. It's Malcolm who comes up with those ideas. It's Malcolm who decides to send in the right people first. This is what we're working at. There's many more experiences and many more examples of this. I hope you understand and see why this is so important. The last thing I'm going to leave you with is this thought that when you're writing these answers and you write about the extract and you want to bring in the rest of the play, the words that will help you more than anything else are earlier, just before this, at the beginning, just after, later on, at the end. Thinking about the relationship, thinking about the relationship between what you're talking about and the bit you're picking out. How one has led to the other, rather than just picking another moment. Hopefully you've got that. Definitely something that's stretching quite a high level. Thanks very much for coming. So I can sign them too now.